So I'm with Pastor Mike Beresford from High Point Church. You're one of the senior pastors, and we're going to be talking about evangelism.
It's good to be with you, Jim.
Jesus said in Matthew 4:19, he said, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." What would you say to someone who wants to learn to become a fisher of men and women, who wants to learn to share the gospel? How do you help them?
So, from a professional aspect, and then from a pastor, about my time of training young people in doing that overseas, it came down to a couple of really simple things that people say, well, that's not biblical. I think it is. What are you good at? And what do you enjoy doing? If you truly enjoy somebody and spend time with them and invite them into your life, they're going to invite you into their life. And it's simple things. It's like, I happen to eat every day. And so I make sure that at least once a week, I'm having a meal with somebody to have a conversation.
After encountering the woman at the well, Jesus spoke to his disciples in John chapter 4, verse 35. He said, "Do you not say, 'There are yet 4 months and then comes the harvest'? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, that they are white for harvest." Mm-hmm. So this concept of white for harvest, do you consider that to be true today? Or was that in his setting?
Does everybody know Christ? No. And so it has to be true today. The things that were in the Bible were either descriptive or prescriptive. And that wasn't about a custom, that was about the hearts of people. And so it was prescriptive. We still can look up and see that there are people who need Jesus all around us. We don't need to do or go anywhere unique, but we do need to do what's in front of us. And that is walking across the street to a neighbor who's watching his wife being put into an ambulance. That's going across the street and inviting neighbor over for coffee. That's doing whatever that is.
Yeah, I was thinking, one of the things we have here is we invite guys over to play Risk once a month. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I haven't invited my neighbors. Why haven't I been thinking about this? It'd be so easy. I mean, I have a couple of guys that I say hi to, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it would be easy to invite them over, play Risk, meet these other guys.
An example of that, a couple of weeks ago, maybe 10 days ago, doorbell rang in the evening and went down to answer it, and there was a guy standing there with a clipboard, and he was gathering signatures so he can get on the ballot so he can run for a county office. And we got talked a little bit. Well, he lives 3 doors up. And I had met his wife as she had been walking one day. Estelle and I were out working in the front yard. And so I said, would you guys your neighbors, would you like to come down for coffee? So, oh, I'd love to. And so they're going to come down in a couple of weeks for dessert.
Okay.
I don't know anything about them, but that's okay.
Right.
The opportunity's there, and it might be a one-time deal. It could be my new best friend. I don't know. I don't know if they're Christians. I don't know anything about their beliefs. But that's okay. I can still risk being nice and being a good neighbor. And I'm going to benefit from them. And hopefully they'll benefit from us. And somewhere along the way, we'll get to talk about who Jesus is. Mm-hmm.
One of the things Pastor Nick talked about this last Sunday was sort of these 5 descriptors of the church, one of which is the army, or an army. It's not that we're a literal army, but there's spiritual activity going on in the world.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that as a church, worldwide church, we could be doing more to reach this harvest. More in the area of thinking in terms of being an army.
Yeah.
It just seems that we're kind of lacking the urgency.
Yeah, I think the key there is the thinking. It's the awareness that the verse I quoted a while ago, Romans 8:28, for those called according to his purpose. Mm-hmm. As a Christian, yes, I benefit. But there's a greater end to that. I'm called according to his purpose.
So there was a survey from the National Association of Evangelicals, found that 63% of individuals became a Christian between the ages of 4 and 14. And the same survey also found that 34% of individuals became a Christian between the ages of 15 to 29. So that leaves, you do the math, about 3% for those 30 and over.
Yeah.
Is it worth our time to reach out to people who are 30 and over?
It's always worth our time. But like I said in the previous conversation, culture has really aimed its tentacles at the young people and the kids of today because those are the formative years. And Satan's really good at what he does, and we have to be better at what we do. And so, yes, the stats are higher to talk to a child or a teenager and to put them on a course. And the Bible says when they put them on that course, and they'll continue it as they grow up.
Right.
But everybody deserves to hear the gospel.
Absolutely. And again, it just seems that the statistics could be changed.
I hope they are.
If the mentality of the people in the churches themselves were more involved in terms of, looking for opportunities, being there, praying for, inviting them to a game.
Yeah.
It just seems that there's more that we could do as a church, and I feel that we're falling down.
A quick story. Talking with a young pastor, a kids pastor, a pretty large church, about 6,000 people, and he was bemoaning the fact that he was working so many hours, but he hadn't really led anybody to Christ in 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he was kind of whining about was that he hadn't been to his kids' baseball games. And I said, let me step back a little bit from this whole conversation and just talk to you for a second. You want to lead people to Christ, but you're too busy. You're not in the environment where non-Christians are. You're missing your kids' games where you've got a whole bunch of parents who you know, because you know the parents of your kids' friends, who are non-Christians. What are you doing sitting here? Why don't you start attending your kids' games and see what God does? I said, I'll call you back in a month. I called him in a month, and he was so excited. He had led 3 people to the Lord in the stands watching baseball games, building those relationships, yelling for their kids, encouraging one another, listening to the stories of what was going on that parents talk about when the idle moments in the game. There's a lot of them in Little League. And able to speak into those. Not as a pastor, as a Christian.
That again reminds me of my own life. I feel so pressed for time that I'm not thinking about my neighbors or people around me necessarily. So a couple of years ago, I took a trip alone. It was a single trip to Arizona and Utah and Colorado. And because I had all kinds of time, and I didn't have anybody pulling me back, why don't we do this or that? When I went on a hike, I would, like the Grand Canyon, I would look for opportunities like you were talking about. And the opportunities just seemed like they were all over the place to talk to people. And part of it was that I'm into creation, and so we could talk about some of the things that I'd already learned. And so, it just seems very, very true that if our eyes are open and we feel that if we allow God to use us, give ourselves a little bit more time to do that type of thing, maybe the opportunities will actually be there.
Oh, the opportunities are there. Busyness is Satan's best tool. And it doesn't take more time. It just takes awareness and inviting people into your daily rhythm of life. Like I said before, I have a meal. Probably 3 of them today.
You're going to eat sometime.
And so that's 21 of them this week. One of them I can invite somebody into and share bread with. And people talk over meals. I'm not going to work 7 days a week. I'm past that, fortunately. And so I'm going to have time to walk across the street and say hi to my neighbor. I'm going to have those things. I can be purposeful in my grocery shopping. I can be purposeful in getting my hair cut. I can be purposeful in a lot of things. If I just think about it, it doesn't take any more time.
Okay. You've already brought up Bless, this initiative, evangelistic initiative that High Point is doing. I want you to talk a little bit more about that. Where did you first learn about it?
So the Covenant Church actually did that as a national initiative for them, and Nick had seen it, and he talked to me about it, and I looked at it, thought it was really good, and so called them, and they said, yeah, it's yours to steal. And so we did, and, began by praying, learn to listen, eat, serve, and then share the story. It's funny, about 4 or 5 weeks into it, a fairly new Christian at the church came up to me after one of the services and said, I really didn't want to do this because you told us to. But I've realized I've been doing it with a friend of mine who is an atheist, and he's coming to church next week. and he said, I kind of sheepishly, thanks. It really was just praying for my friend and spending time with him and paying attention to his life and talking about his life and listening to his life. And I've had a couple meals with him and we've talked about things, and it's just the normal rhythms. Okay. It really is.
Yeah. I noticed that there is a book. Somebody wrote a book about, Bless.
Yeah, there's a book called Bless. There's another book called Joining Jesus, which is a different title, same concept. Sometimes I think the things that we're leery of, we complicate. And so we don't have to do them. We find the excuses in them, where Jesus was more about life on life than anything. That's where the opportunities come up.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing these insights with us, and obviously you have a fantastic background with as being a pastor, but also with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, probably other things that you've had in your past.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk with you, Jim. Thank you.
Yeah, great.